Morning, everybody. I'm just going to wait one more minute to just allow a few more people to join the call. Okay, I'm going to make a start. If I pause for a second or two, it's probably just because I'm letting additional people into the call. So just bear with me if that occurs. Well, good morning, Gateways. Today's Remembrance Assembly is going to be have a special theme. It's 2020, so that makes it the 75th anniversary since VE Day, which is the day in which the Allies proclaimed victory in the European conflict of World War II. And I've wanted to talk about a certain person for a long while now that I'm going to share with you today. And it seems appropriate that this should be the occasion to do that. In my hometown of York, on the outskirts of York, there's a village called Copmanthorpe. And in Copmanthorpe, there's a memorial, and the memorial is to the soldiers who gave their lives in the First World War on one side of the memorial, and then on the other side of the memorial are the names of those who gave their lives in the Second World War. Opposite this memorial is a house, and in that house is a friend of mine named...
Right, guys, quiet, please.
To mute your videos, please. And this gentleman is a friend of mine, and my father, who visits him on a daily basis. His name's Stanley Oates, and he's aged 101. He's certainly the oldest living veteran in the village, and we believe that he's probably the only living veteran in the village from the Second World War. And so I'm just going to share with you today a few things about him. He grew up in Copmanthorpe, and when the First World War broke out, it took a few years for Stanley to join the army. He actually joined the army in 1941, and in 1941, here he is. Stanley went down to Suffolk, and in Suffolk he trained for 1 month, and then he came up to Sheffield, and he trained to be a driver. This is a picture of his truck. It was a 6-wheel, 10-ton Mack truck, and it was very dear to him. Stanley trained in Sheffield. He actually, before he even left Sheffield, he saw the first casualties of the war from his perspective. A direct hit from an air raid bomb blew up a house opposite him and killed 6 soldiers whom he knew. He saw the limbs of one of the soldiers hanging out of the rubble. He hadn't left the British Isles yet, and he'd already seen the horrors that war could have. He went up to Glasgow, and from Glasgow he went to the coast of Scotland, and he sailed with a convoy of many thousands of troops past Iceland, round to the Americas, down the American coast, up to the Caribbean, and then back east to Africa. They refueled at Sierra Leone, and they went down the west side of Africa, rounded the Cape, and back up to Suez, where they unloaded. Stanley was therefore going to serve in the African field of conflict. They did this, by the way, to avoid the German U-boats. Stan then his job was to transport all the things that were unloaded from Suez to the depots where they were keeping all the ammunition and other supplies for the soldiers. And these were kept in the caverns, believe it or not, near the pyramids. So he got to see the pyramids on a regular basis, and he would pick things up. And then from there, they would also transport things to the front line in Libya and Tunisia. And they would have to travel along a single road. It was the only road going. And so it was incredibly dangerous because he would have to risk dive bombers from the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, who would know exactly where the trucks would be traveling. And if a direct hit was made on a truck, then it would kill everybody inside. And sometimes they would also cause explosions depending on what the trucks were carrying. So it was a very terrifying experience at times. However, he did have some pleasant memories as well, memories that when he tells the story, he actually bursts out laughing. So there are a couple that I'll share. The first was that he and his friend were driving along. Stanley was the driver, and Stan's friend climbed onto the bonnet of the truck, jumped onto the next truck while it was driving in the back, climbed into the back, and stole a load of tinned peaches. Then he brought the tinned peaches back. He brought the tinned peaches back to the truck, and they kept them in the back of their truck to eat later. Sadly, Stan had to pick up, or sadly for Stan, he's a thief, so don't feel too sorry for him on this particular occasion, but he had to pick up some Italian prisoners of war. And Stan loved the Italians because they were always laughing and singing, even when they'd been captured. He thought they had the right idea. These Italian prisoners stole all of his peaches while he was driving. They did, however, they were sneaky enough to cut the bottom of the tins open, eat the peaches out from the tins, and then put them back to escape notice, so that when they dropped the prisoners off, they had no idea that their stolen contraband had disappeared. So he tells these stories. Another story he tells is how once a Messerschmitt, these very dangerous airplanes that would terrorize the trucks, actually flew right down next to the truck and just at ground level, very unusual, and just waved to them. And this German pilot just was waving at them. He was obviously out of ammunition. He'd hit other targets and he was flying home. And Stan found that the Germans were very much like him. He really got to know a lot of Germans. Another pilot, and I can show you a picture of this pilot's plane, because his plane actually went down, but the pilot remained unscathed, or at least survived the crash. Came over to them, and here you can just make out the plane crash there that Stan took a photo of, and the pilot came over to them and started laughing and joking with them as if nothing had happened, and they all made him a cup of tea. So he had a cup of tea with them before he went to the prisoner of war camp. So there were a number of occasions where Stan had some fond memories. On the other hand, he also saw many terrible things as well. He saw many dead bodies on the side of the road. He had experience with people's vehicles burning and people burning inside. He once saved a man from a burning truck by pulling him out. And so Stan saw the horrors of war as well. And he lost many of his friends, people that he grew up with, in the tank regiments, and they had died burning in tanks. So the sight of something similar must have been very harrowing for Stan. He also had somebody that was had I guess the jitters in his van. He was driving in the front of the van with him, and he said to Stan that he just couldn't take it anymore. He couldn't take the nerves of these dive bombers coming and blowing up the trucks with very little that they could do. And every time he heard a plane, this man would actually jump out of the truck and run for cover. And eventually he said to Stan, "I'm going to have to go and serve in the cook's wagon because I can't take it anymore." The very next day, the cook's wagon took a direct hit, and all three men, including this gentleman, perished. And Stan actually has a photo of the grave in the desert of the three men that died. It's not a cemetery, it's just 3 graves in the desert that he has to remember that experience. Towards the end of the war, Stan went first to Italy. He was actually posted on the slopes of Mount Vesuvius, and then he made his way to Greece. And it's in Greece that he had the most horrifying stories to tell. Stories that he often goes silent when he tells them and just pauses for a minute. And you can see that he finds it very, very difficult, or that those memories are particularly horrifying to him. One night when he was in a very tall building, they woke up the next morning to find that 6 men that he served on the top floor had their throats slit in the night and were dead. And they waited to see what would happen for several nights. And a few nights later, they saw men coming across from a building on the other side of the street via a ladder to climb into the building. And they pulled one of them in to the room. They tipped the ladder and sent a couple to their death. And then the man that was pulled into the room was beaten to death. And Stan experienced this. And the worst part of the story is that these men were after the boots of soldiers. Such was the horrors of war at the time, that they were prepared to risk their lives and to kill others just so that they could get footwear. So that's what they were after. The other story that he tells in Greece was that he, and I've got no photos of either of these, I'll explain why I don't have photos of this one in a minute. He tells the story of how he used to have to take bodies down that were hanging from lampposts. There was a civil war in Greece when the German forces withdrew, and the nationalists used to round up and kill communist sympathizers by hanging them. And they would even hang the children and wives of these people. And Stan had to take down the bodies of women and children from lampposts with placards around them to deter people from doing it. And he did take photos of that, but they were confiscated. And he does believe that it's one of the things that is not talked about in the war. So very, very frightening for him and very disturbing. At the end of the war, he first went to Austria and then Germany. And in Germany, he did get to drive his first Mercedes. But additionally, he also saw refugee camps. He was there after the war still. He saw Russians half starved to death as like skeletal forms. And he even helped a family. He used to save his cigarettes because he didn't smoke, but he was rationed them. And they came in useful twice. The first use he had was to get past Russian blockades. He would give the Russian guards cigarettes so he could drive past and not get held up. And the other use, he gave them to a family he knew. And that family didn't smoke the cigarettes, but they just used them to barter for things that they needed to just stay alive. And that's what he seems to think the situation was at the time, was that people were just trying to stay alive at that point. So Stan returned to Copmanthorpe, and he is now the last, we believe, the last remaining veteran of the war. He exchanged his rifle when he got back for a civilian suit and about £100, and he spent 3/4 of his life without the friends that are on the monument that he can see on a daily basis. He remembers them. 5 of them were part of his football team before the war. And every Remembrance Day, the people of Copmanthorpe gather around the monument to remember those that have fallen. But Stan, you can just about see his house in the background. Stan actually doesn't go to the service. He actually watches from his window. He's never actually attended a remembrance service. He remembers them from his own house in his own way. Now, I would just encourage everybody, if you know somebody that has served in the war, in any conflict whatsoever, or people that just have memories that are worth knowing, that you get to know them because their memory, you can become the guardian of their memory, and you can pass it on. And their memories do live on, but it's our responsibility to do so. We're about to observe the silence. For me, I'm going to be thinking about the sacrifices that Stan and his generation made, and the fact that I can't understand what they went through is a testament to what they went through being worth it, because the fact that they went through that has given us a more peaceful world in the long run. And I've not had to experience the tragedies that Stan has. We're going to turn to the CCF now, who are going to take us through the ceremony involving the silence. During the silence, there'll also be a short video right at the start of the silence that I'll play muted, which is just Sophie Palin laying a wreath in the chapel on the Harewood estate, which commemorates the names of those fallen in Harewood. So I'm gonna turn around to the CCF now.
They shall not grow old, as we that remain grow old. Age shall not wear of them, nor the days of time. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. We will remember them. How the blessed can say, we go tomorrow.